I'll take it from here, Batman.
Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and this is Superman Beyond: Origin Explored. Written by J.T. Krull and illustrated by Howard Porter, Superman Beyond came out as a 21-issue comic that carried forward Batman Beyond. Before the Superman Beyond comic events, Superman and the new Batman, or Terry McGinnis, fought together to defeat Lex Luthor, the mayor for life. Also, Lois Lane had been dead for a while now, and Superman had left Earth after winning the battle. The comic revolves around the elder version of Superman, who is not really the strongest being on Earth anymore. The world had changed drastically, and there were forces that were doing a finer job than he used to do in his prime. This forces Superman to question if the world really still needs him, and what lies ahead in his future. But it is a fact that the world will always need the Man of Steel. So, in today's video, I'll begin by taking you through the first issue, or issue 0 of the comic, which details Superman Beyond's origin, and then we'll explore the exhilarating and adventurous 20 issues that contains 2 major stories featuring Superman Beyond and his adventures against the likes of Lex Luthor and his daughter, Lobo, the galaxy's greatest bounty hunter, as well as an entire race of aliens. So, let's get this intergalactic party started, shall we? Actually, before we go into our explanation, we do have just one very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks! Now, let's begin.
Look out!
Who is Superman Beyond? An alien race called the Brothers of the Crimson Storm attacks an unnamed planet of green aliens. The attackers would have invaded, plundered, and examined the green aliens had it not been for the Man of Tomorrow, the Man of Steel, the good old Superman. He arrived on this exoplanet and began rounding up the alien bad guys. However, Superman was having trouble being the unstoppable force that was kind of his trademark. An alien tank managed to take down the Man of Steel, but he was up on his feet almost immediately because he knew that being Superman was a lifetime commitment, someone who shouldn't take the day off. And moreover, he couldn't exactly ignore a cry for help or a plea for justice. Having said that, was he suffering from the first symptoms of senility? Was he becoming a victim of old age? After having kicked the butts of the bad guys with his righteous rage, Superman turned to the denizens of the exoplanet, who thanked him for his services. Their conversation brought up a question of Superman's home planet, Earth, a place that he had left a year ago after defeating one of his greatest enemies, Lex Luthor. But Superman decided it was time to stop being an intergalactic tourist and returned home. I guess apart from all the enemies and kryptonite, homesickness as well was one of Superman's weaknesses. After coming back to Earth, the first place that Clark visited was the graves of his parents, Jonathan and Martha. The grief of the several losses that Superman has had to undergo had made him remorseful, and he began to wonder what exactly lies ahead in his future. He wonders if the world even really needs Superman anymore. Back on Earth, Metropolis had become a cesspool in just 1 year after Lex and Superman were gone. Lex Luthor might have been a corrupt dictator, but he kept the dregs in line. Since there was no potent force to stop them, petty criminals and small gangs sprouted like weeds in an unattended field, and the current Justice League found itself overwhelmed by their sheer number. The Justice League contacts Terry McGinnis to seek out his help and inclusion into the team, but Batman has to look after Neo Gotham, whose streets are just filled with crime. Although he was sympathetic, he couldn't really help them. Disappointed that Terry had refused, Aquagirl and Micron decide to make a last-ditch attempt to bring in Batman by going to Neo Gotham itself. Later, Clark goes to meet his old friend, Jimmy Olsen, who had become a media mogul by spending his severance from the Daily Planet on a startup that happened to take off at rocket speed. Jimmy's company developed the O-Phone, a watch-shaped device that delivered news directly to the user. In fact, Jimmy gives one of these O-Phones to Clark Kent. At this point, it becomes necessary to mention that Olsen knew about Clark's secret identity. Olsen had previously made a makeshift device that let out an ultrasonic sound as a means of drawing Superman's attention to an emergency situation. The O-Phone that Olsen presented with Clark had the same feature. Jimmy offered Clark a job, considering that Clark is an experienced reporter, but more importantly, he is trying to help out an old friend. The Wrath of Armageddon. On the other hand, there was something else going on in the Hobbs Bay detention facility with a prisoner named Marco Macaro. He had been in prison for quite a while now and never failed to present the best behavior because he was trying to get out of prison earlier than his sentence on good behavior. But why was he choosing even the most menial of jobs and behaving well? Well, he loved his daughter, and she had spent almost all of her life without him, and Marco wanted to reunite with her. One day, Marco's daughter Mina was supposed to pay him a visit at the prison, but instead of Mina, Marco's wife wife, Teresa, arrived to tell Marco that Mina would no longer visit him. Poor Marco was devastated by the news and wanted nothing but his daughter. Later that day, Marco was sent with a few other prisoners for an outside work detail at Lex Labs, which were to be turned into a place for community service. During the course of the job, Marco's elbow accidentally hits a hidden panel, which opens a cache filled with cylinders that contain some green chemicals. A guard named Rogers accused Marco of knowing about the cylinders and opening it deliberately to make an escape. Furious at Rogers' constant bullying, Marco slammed him into one of the cylinders, and the other guards opened fire. One of the bullets hit the canister, exposing Marco to the green chemical. It seemed that Marco was boiling alive. They ordered the place to be locked down and called for a paramedic. But all hell broke loose when they arrived. Marco turned into a rocky monstrosity, much to the likes of the Thing from the Fantastic Four comics. By now, Warhawk and Barda were called in to deal with a cleaning crew. This was the same crew that was sent to Lex Labs, but Warhawk didn't know that the crew comprised of notorious prisoners, and one of them had recently mutated into a powerful supervillain. Meanwhile, Marco absorbs more of the green canisters and develops powers like transforming his body into something as soft as clay but as hard as a rock. He smashes out of the facility and takes on the Justice Leaguers. Barda compares Marco's inhuman shriek to the cries of people from the torture pits of Apocalypse when their bodies are torn and twisted inside out. Marco christens himself as Armageddon and is prepared to pay back for the pain and humiliation that he suffered from the vindictive guards and the entire world in general. Warhawk and Barda attack the monster, but to no avail. Back at his apartment, Superman was grieving the loss of his sweetheart when the O-phone rang, revealing about the meta-powered creature. There is a slight goof here though. The news report on the device says that the creature was identified as Armageddon, but that happens a little later in the comic when Marco absorbs a tank. Anyway, Clark ripped off his suit to take on the identity of Superman and headed to Ground Zero, where Mark had incapacitated Barda and Warhawk. However, Green Lantern arrived and offered some assistance to Marco, and even that turned out to become useless against Armageddon's might and powers. By now, he could increase his size to preposterous levels, but everyone, including Armageddon, was shocked to see Superman. "You've caused enough death and destruction for one day. I advise you stand down. You won't like the alternative." But that did not stop Armageddon from unleashing his wrath on the now old Superman. He usually allowed his opponent the first shot so that he could determine their mettle, but it was probably not the best strategy against Armageddon. The reason for this was that Marco had received his powers from Lex Labs, and if Lex Luthor was involved, you can bet the kryptonite had to be somewhere in the mix. At this point, Armageddon absorbs a tank to build armor for his skin and rechristens himself as Armageddon. He unleashes a rain of attacks on Superman, who doubts his capabilities and strength to the extent that he even thinks that this battle will become his very end. However, he shrugged off the monster's attack like it was nothing, and that's probably why the world called him Superman. Superman followed his enemy to a nearby low-income housing in the neighborhood called the Suicide Slum, where his family lived, but his little daughter was shocked and petrified to see her father's new look. The Man of Steel realized the sorry state that Marco was in, and offered some kind words and sympathy, but Marco didn't pay heed to any of it. It seemed that Marco wanted Superman to destroy him, because he knew that he had become a monster, filled with frustration and fury. "You're supposed to protect the innocent, to keep my Mina safe from monsters like me. Do your job, man, or I'll tear the heart out of the city." Superman tried his best to do what Armageddon had just asked him, but the hero was clearly not living up to his reputation. In the end, Superman created a tornado-shaped vacuum using his speed and pulled Armageddon into space. Marco had lost his powers in space, and Superman could have left him to die out there, but instead, he chose to bring him back to Earth because everyone deserves a second chance. Superman and Marco came crashing down, but the former protected the convicted felon from a certain death. Superman was grievously injured, and now that no kryptonite was in the vicinity, he started to gain his same old strength. Marco was bewildered at the thought of such selfless action, but that is what made Superman who he was. The Justice League helped its founding member, and Superman accepts their offer to join the League once again. The final page of the comic shows Superman visiting the grave of his beloved wife, but someone else is present there as well. It's none other than his old friend and colleague, Bruce Wayne. The two of them reminisce about Lois Lane, and although Bruce doesn't say explicitly, he is more than happy to have his old friend back. Does the world still need a Superman? Are you ready for this epic exploration of all the 20 issues of the Superman Beyond comic? Well, give me 5 more minutes and I promise you that you will stay till the end. Let's begin. The first issue starts with Superman reminiscing about how he lost his family, his loved ones, and ultimately his homeworld of Krypton. His parents save him and tuck him away inside a rocket ship, millions of miles away to Earth, where he finds another home, another set of parents, and another life. But over the years, he has suffered great losses, probably what happened to Krypton, and the fact that he cannot really set aside his past, he has always tried to keep his past alive. So much so that his Fortress of Solitude has become more of a museum, and he has become the caretaker. He still comes to Metropolis occasionally, but fails to connect with the place. The people don't really recognize him, and he doesn't really recognize them either. A lot has changed. We are then introduced to a young girl, only known as Miss Walters, who has lost every penny when her mother died, and the creditors took it all away. However, she gets a call from a government agent telling her that there was a safety deposit box at the Metropolis United Bank under her mother's name, and that only she was authorized to access it. Meanwhile, there was trouble brewing at the docks as a firefight had broken out between officials and a few terrorists. However, Superman arrived just in time to take care of the situation. Still, to his surprise, a bunch of men in armored exosuits interrupt Superman and quickly rounds up the bad guys. The first issue ended with Superman asking in bewilderment, "Who are you?" In reality, it was men from the Metropolis Police Department who had been given a serious upgrade during the time that Superman was away, and these guys were almost as powerful as him. And although the cops were great at the whole fighting bad guys aspect, much work was needed to protect the innocent front. Superman was quick to notice that a civilian was trapped in a falling crane, and wasted no time in helping him. After all was over, Superman turned to the cops and noticed that they had nanotech floating in their systems, which enhanced their speed and their strength, making them tougher, or in other words, super. Like father, like daughter. Later, Superman visits Lois's grave and confides his fears and apprehensions. "I have to admit, I was impressed. Made me feel a little irrelevant. What am I supposed to do now? Living as Superman is kind of lonely, but almost everyone Clark Kent knew is gone. Maybe it's time I moved on and left Earth." He was desperately trying to get a reason to stay back on Earth, and he was about to get that opportunity. The young girl, Miss Walters from before, went to the safety deposit box and opened it, only to find a strange card in the box. She goes to an old abandoned building and swipes the card at the gate. As soon as she enters, she is greeted by a holographic figure who says, "Hello, Lucinda. My name is Lex Luthor. I am your father." Luthor tells Lucinda that he had not distanced himself from her for some irrelevant fear of being a tabloid fodder from the bad PR, as the people had believed, but rather it was a necessary sacrifice that had to be made in order to protect her from his greatest enemy. Any guesses as to who that enemy might be? He tells her all about Superman, whom he considers cancer that would take over the world. Cancer that needed to be eradicated at the earliest. So, despite becoming the President of the United States, and even the Mayor for Life of Metropolis, Lex failed at eliminating his greatest enemy. Yeah, big surprise there. Superman gets into his Clark Kent avatar and takes a stroll into the streets, hoping to clear his head, but it's filled with distractions of all sorts. It seems as if the whole city was budding about the new heroes on patrol. The giant screens revealed that the Super Cops were the result of a joint venture between the government and GNX technology. The Super Cops all have a huge fan following, but the chief among them is a guy named Walker, who is the de facto leader of the Super Cops because of his exceptional leadership skills. Meanwhile, Nixon, the head of the GNX, plans to embed the nanotech into more cops, and Luthor reveals that he has managed to amass a mountain of pure kryptonite with the intention of burying Superman underneath it. Furthermore, Luthor has an exosuit that matches Superman's powers, and probably goes beyond them. Superman joins the Super Cops in one of their battles, proving that he's not as powerful as he used to be. Was he becoming weaker, or were his opponents becoming stronger? Nevertheless, he was fighting sophisticated robots that were trying to infiltrate the GNX facility. But after they had been neutralized, the Super Cops noticed that the robots were strong enough to infiltrate the facility without getting noticed, and yet they chose to create an elegant mess and gain attention. Superman was quick to deduce that this was nothing more than a decoy, and entered the facility, only to learn that Lucinda had sent another robot, built in her own image, to extract core information about the nanotechnology. She also tells him that she is in fact Lex Luthor's daughter. Superman brings this information to the police, and Nixon gives the Super Cops a device that could extract the nanotech from anybody who it had embedded with them. Meanwhile, Lucinda contacts one Mr. Stone and offers him the technology, but Stone says he has no need for technology. Could this be Victor Stone, also known as Cyborg? Well, no, he was actually Solomon Grundy, the crime boss and major DC villain. Little Miss Luthor and Solomon Grundy's curious case. Placing the nanotech in Grundy's hands was an ace move by the Luthors because it kept the cops and Superman busy with Grundy's super thugs. This gave the Luthors enough time to pull the final pieces in place. Luthor saw the world as a game and believed that if you didn't play the game, you get played. I won't go as to say I really disagree with the guy, but this time he wanted to end the game before his king fell. Superman had always been amazed by humanity's capacity for greatness and their inherent will to achieve. However, this same drive often became their worst enemy when it was twisted by fear and the hunger to dominate and control. But at any rate, Walker extracts the nanotech from one of Grundy's soldiers, and the process kills the man. Superman reminds Walker that he is a cop and not the judge, jury, and executioner. But it wasn't long before Grundy himself arrives at the scene. The showdown between Superman and Grundy was epic, but the battle was turning into Grundy's favor. But Grundy had only arrived to buy time and make Superman just where Luthor wanted him to be. The kryptonite rocks had started accumulating all over space, brought there by Luthor, of course. And Superman's supervision was already failing him, but he could see well enough to understand what was going wrong. It was nothing short of a green asteroid belt orbiting the blue planet. People all across the globe could see it, as if the aurora lights had engulfed the sky. The kryptonite asteroid belt had already started to drain Superman's powers, so much so that he couldn't even gather enough strength to stand. Superman used the last bit of strength he had to roast one of Grundy's men with his heat vision, but Solomon Grundy soon beat the fight out of Superman. The super cops finally realized that something was wrong with Superman and decided to rescue him out of there. But Grundy proved to be a force to be reckoned with. As Grundy began the carnage, Superman rose back up one more time and would have been finished off by the bad guys if it had not been for his old friend and current savior, Batman. The Dark Knight rescues the Man of Steel. If it wasn't for Batman, Superman would have been finished. Over the years, they have been there for one another, to lend a hand or a fist. But although Bruce Wayne wouldn't exactly agree, they both are more than former teammates. They're friends. Bruce Wayne came out of retirement because he knew it was Superman's most desperate hour of need. The two greatest heroes of the DC Universe fought in tandem, like a team, like they were born to fight this fight. And, like always, Batman had help from his little pieces of exceptional technology that knocked down the bad guys long enough to make an escape. And this time around, Batman took care of the flying part, or at least with the Batplane. Batman took his old friend to the Fortress of Solitude, where Superman revealed who was behind the kryptonite in orbit. Batman leaves for Gotham to figure out a way to remove the asteroids, and asks Superman to stay in the fortress, whose walls will protect him from the effect of the kryptonite. Now that Superman was in his untraceable hideout, Lucinda wondered how they'd ever get to him, but Luthor had already made a plan in action. He knew that Superman was a righteous man who would do anything if the lives of civilians were threatened, and to do this, he gave the world the ultimate evil it had ever seen, a supermassive robot that risked the sheer existence of Metropolis. Superman's ultimate suit, the Eradicator Protocol. The super cops were never trained for this kind of fight, and found it difficult to even stay in the fight, let alone win it. Desperate times, as they say, call for desperate measures, and Walker embedded himself with the nanotech that he had been collecting from the bad guys. He was giving the robot everything he had in him, but even that wasn't enough. Meanwhile, Superman was standing in his fortress, doing nothing, hiding. Meanwhile, Walker was put down by the mechanical monstrosity. His colleagues came out to help him, but the overload of nanotech was meddling with his brain, and Walker extracted the nanotech from his own friends, threatening their lives. Superman could no longer see his city getting destroyed because of a fight between two giants of unimaginable technological strength, and Superman did what was expected of him. He used a protective augmentation to cover his entire body, but it could very well prove to be fatal for him. This was the activation of Superman's Eradicator Protocol. Meanwhile, the battle between Walker and Luthor's giant was destroying much of Metropolis, but Luthor was willing to risk it all so that he could destroy Superman. Although Lucinda was getting cold feet, Lex was sure that Superman would arrive to save his precious city and its people who had forgotten Superman, and soon he arrived. Superman took charge of the battle, hitting the monster with one attack after another, but Walker had gone crazy. He wanted more power and tried to augment the technology that Superman was wearing. In fact, Walker could take a part of it and expose some of Superman's body to the kryptonite, but the Eradicator Superman managed to knock the super cop down. Superman resumed his battle with Luthor's monster and didn't stop until it was crushed into pieces. Superman took the battle to Lucinda Luthor and tried to reason with her. I mean, this girl didn't even really know him, but she still wanted to kill him. Clearly, Lex Luthor was a people person, adept at manipulating others to do his bidding, and he didn't exactly shy away from using his own daughter for this purpose. But it wasn't too long before Lucinda understood what her father really was. Lex was trying to destroy the entire planet in order to kill Superman. Lex had managed to converge all the kryptonite rocks to create another moon, and this moon was wreaking global havoc, creating tsunamis, earthquakes, and whatnot. So Superman had to destroy it. He flew straight into this moon of doom and pushed it into the sun, and although he managed to accomplish the task, the solar radiation was eating through his Eradicator armor. Meanwhile, Lucinda parted ways with her father's hologram and his ideologies, and Walker was taken to the GNX facility to be studied. But what about Superman? Did he make it back? a new direction for Superman Beyond. Well, okay, spoiler alert, yes, Superman came back, and with Batman's help, he assumed a new identity and started serving in the fire department as Cal Kent. He begins his day job and serves as Superman if things get a little out of hand. Cal Kent learns that while some hate Superman for meddling with their day job, others love him for helping out every now and then. But there's another force at play. A ship with soldiers from a planet called Trulia had come to exact their revenge on Superman for what he had done to their planet. But what exactly did he do? So, a long time ago, the Trillions lived in a peaceful community that strived for excellence and prosperity at all fronts. In their quest, they even became friends with the primitive race of Trillions called the Mangals. However, one day, something came down from the sky. Now, from the looks of it, this guy looked like Superman who had become an age-old vampire, or something to that effect. You know, like if Superman started looking like Morbius from the Marvel Universe. So, this strange Superman turned the Mangals into feral beasts that pushed the progress and development of the people of Trulia 1,000 years back. And even now, the struggle continued on their planet. The soldiers from Trulia were determined to take their revenge, but Superman proved to be more than a match. Left without a choice, the Trillions contact Lobo, the greatest bounty hunter in the entire galaxy. The following day, Superman goes to seek help from Martian Manhunter to find out more information about these alien guys. Superman didn't really recognize these green aliens at first, but then something came to him, and he wanted Martian Manhunter to help him remember more. Superman began to remember Trulia, as an advanced society, was at the height of technology, and without evils like war, famine, and poverty. But contrary to what the Trillions portrayed, their success came at the cost of the weaker and smaller Mangals. They were enslaved by the Trillions, and Superman helped the Mangals to return to their natural habitat in the Trillion forests. But Martian Manhunter objects to this, a bold decision, swooping in and turning their lives upside down without examining the situation more closely. However, in Superman's defense, he was much more younger and probably saw simple solutions to more complex matters. Superman wanted to find them and reason with them before the situation spiraled down into something much worse. But the worst unfortunately did come to Superman in the form of Lobo, the bounty hunter. Lobo grabbed Superman by a chain and dragged him out. Martian Manhunter came to Superman's defense, and a fight between these three uber-strong aliens ensued. War of the Worlds. Lobo wasn't necessarily a villain per se. According to Superman, he was just not really motivated enough to be a villain. On the contrary, Lobo was someone driven by extreme greed and his love for chaos, mayhem, and destruction. In short, he was a royal pain. Lobo loved collateral damage, and Superman wasn't up to giving the bounty hunter that satisfaction, so he knocked him out of the city with one super punch, where there could be less destruction on life and property. Superman tried to reason with Lobo about how the Trillions were misguided, but right and wrong were irrelevant to Lobo, and it wasn't long before the Trillions had arrived. They knocked Martian Manhunter down before incapacitating the Man of Steel. Superman is taken to Trulia, where he is to be tried for the charges of disrupting the social order of the planet and instigating the Mangals to wage a war against their masters. Superman was tortured in front of the Trillion people by their leader, but not all of them thought torture was a better alternative to punishment. Later that night, Superman had visions of his two fathers, both Kryptonian and human. They remind him of who he is and how he must act to better serve the people, no matter which race they belong to. Tyro, the Trillion scientist who is behind bringing in Superman, pays the latter a visit. Superman reminds Tyro that he is not the evil that his leader Epoch was trying to portray, but Tyro believes that freeing the Mangals was the greatest act of violence committed against his race, and that the Mangals were Superman's disciples. For better or for worse, Tyro's beliefs become stronger when a group of Mangals stormed the facility holding Superman, and most interestingly, they were wearing his symbol. When Superman freed the Mangals, he had hoped that they would return to their forest habitat and live the life they used to live, but that unfortunately didn't happen. The Mangals instead chose to take weapons into their hands and wage a never-ending war against their former enslavers. The Mangals freed Superman and were shooting the Trillions, but Superman forced them to stop firing. However, Superman had to choose a side in the battle that he started a long time ago, and of course, he chose the race that helped him instead of the one that was going to torture him eternally. But the Trillions had managed to grab one of the Mangals and put him to torture to extract information about their secret city in the depths of the forests. Furthermore, the Trillions were developing a bioweapon that would annihilate the Mangals. Their leader, Epoch, wanted to use it right away, but Tyro reminded him that the weapon was far from ready. Although it would definitely destroy the Mangals, it could also jeopardize all life on Trulia. Meanwhile, Superman was being greeted and hailed as a god, something that he never wanted to be, something that his parents had warned him against. Mangals were once saved by Superman, and they didn't seem to forget that. But the Mangals had changed. They had grown bigger and stronger, as if they had gone through thousands of years of evolution in just a few years. That is when Superman learns that the Mangals that he had seen back then were all children, because all the adults had been killed off by the Trillions in a genocide. the Trillion brutality and genocide. The situation was so bad for the Mangals that the children back then didn't even really know what an adult Mangal looked like. The Mangals take Superman to their leader, Morgantha, who narrates the terrible ordeal from the past. She was among the many Mangals who were taken by the Trillions. While she initially thought that she was being taken to be killed, she was wrong. In fact, Morgantha was going to be subjected to a fate worse than death. The Trillions forced her to serve as a breeding machine. She would cherish the life growing inside her, while knowing its fate was filled with misery. Scared, the warrior Mangal believed that with Superman's return, the Mangals could finally defeat the Trillions once and for all. But Superman made it clear that neither did he come to Trulia to fight with the Mangals, nor was the war the answer to their strife. Meanwhile, Epoch was raising an army to fight the final battle, but Tyro was worried about the extent to which Epoch might go to annihilate the Mangals. On the other hand, the Mangals were also preparing for battle, and although Superman didn't really want to participate in the battle, he was forced to defend the Mangals when the Trillions attacked. Superman initially tried to save the Mangals by asking them to retreat, but they were a proud race, unwilling to bend down. They knew it was a suicide mission against the Trillion army, but they went in anyway. Superman then turned to the Trillions, but faced a similar disappointment. In fact, the advanced Trillion weapons shot him down, but somehow Superman found himself protected by a green wall. It was none other than Green Lantern. It turns out that Martian Manhunter had managed to bring a few friends to Trulia to save his old mate, and that's when the Justice League marched towards war, but not with the intention of winning it. They wanted to stop it. Justice tastes better when served by the League. Over the years that Superman saved countless people from a certain end, and the countless wars he had fought, he had learned that when standing between two opposing forces, it helped to have your own personal army. This time around, his army consisted of heroes such as Martian Manhunter, Big Barda, Starfire, and Green Lantern. The team of heroes collectively destroyed and incapacitated both sides, while both sides attacked them. But that was all going for a toss because Epoch had set his mind on using Tyro's untested bioweapon against the Mangals. This brings us to the final issue of this exhilarating comic. The Trillion Megabomb was embedded into the planet. While Starfire, Green Lantern, and Big Barda struggled to get it out, Martian Manhunter and Superman tried to solve the issue with dialogue. Superman's words started taking effect on Tyro, the one who designed the Megabomb, but Epoch was determined to see the bomb detonate. While Tyro was getting cold feet about annihilating an entire race, and he was the only one who knew how to disarm the bomb, Epoch threw Tyro out of the plane to his death, but Superman saved him. Superman brought Tyro to the bomb, where Tyro once again went into thinking. This time, it was about the aftermath of his actions. If he deactivates the bomb, he will choose the Mangals over his own people, but Superman reminds him that he is choosing life over death, and not one race over another. Trust me, if doing the right things were easy, the universe would be a much better place. The bomb was deactivated, and it was now time for the big super speech from Superman that was supposed to bring together two races who have hated each other since time immemorial. Two races who were more obsessed with killing each other than living themselves. Superman reminded them that both sides had done irreversible harm to the other, but remembering the past and reliving it each day were two different things. And that is how Superman Beyond saved a planet from its imminent doom. But hey, there's also a lot of Superman Beyond that we got to see in the high-octane two-part episode in the third season of Batman Beyond, the animated show. The episode was called The Call and revolved around Superman recruiting Terry McGinnis to find a traitor who was killing the Justice League members. Or at least the traitor was trying to do so. So let's quickly dive into it, shall we?
I'll take it from here, Batman.
The Call to Join the League. A monorail in Metropolis loses control and begins speeding up on a collision course with another commuter train. Micron gets a call on the JLU emergency channel and he rushes in to help. However, as soon as he tries to exit the train, he's stopped by a mysterious but powerful force field. This results in Micron suffering severe damage. Meanwhile, Batman Beyond, or Terry McGinnis, chases down the notorious criminal Inique. Batman manages to shoot down Inique's aircraft, but she grabs a civilian and takes him hostage by wrapping herself around him. But Inique had messed up with the wrong guy. The man starts spinning at superhuman speed, spreading Inique in every possible direction. In the end, it is revealed that the guy was none other than one of the co-founders of the Justice League, Superman. Much like Superman Beyond from the comics, this Superman is also old and has gray hair. Superman and Batman return to the Batcave in Gotham, where Superman meets and greets his old friend and retired Batman, Bruce Wayne. Superman reveals that he wants Terry to join the Justice League. Bruce asks whether Terry would simply serve as Micron's replacement in the squad, but Superman says that Terry's skills and capabilities had earned him the spot. Although Superman asks Bruce if Terry could join the Justice League United, Bruce says it was Terry's decision to make. In the end, Terry could not stop himself from taking the prestigious role. and he followed Superman to the JLU watchtower. But Terry's arrival is not a welcome sight for the other Justice League members, who treat him with hostility and chastise Superman for not consulting them before getting Terry on the team. The team walks out in anger and protest, and Terry feels that joining the League maybe wasn't such a good idea after all. However, Superman tells Terry that Micron's accident was no accident, but a deliberate attempt to kill him, and he believed that it was an inside job because only the Justice League had the technology that was used to create the force field that destroyed Micron's cellular structure. But Terry falls into a state of disbelief and shock upon hearing that Earth's greatest heroes, people who have defended Earth more times than one could count, could attempt to kill one of their own. So Terry was basically hired or recruited by Superman so that he could spy on the other members of the League, a job that he didn't exactly like. It was a sheer betrayal. Nevertheless, he begins keeping an eye on each of the members, and Aquagirl, who had gone for a swim, suddenly disappears from the feed as the security cameras go blank all of a sudden. Terry rushes into the tank and finds that it is overheating due to a possible malfunction. But was it intentional or simply an accident? The doors to the tank fail to open, and none of Terry's weapons seem to help either. So he rushed to seize Big Barda's Mega Rod, returned to the tank, and shot the door open with the Mega Rod. Had it not been for his quick thinking, Aquagirl would have lost her life. However, Terry and Superman then investigate the tank's panel and discover that it had been sabotaged with the intention of killing Aquagirl. Treachery everywhere, not a soul to trust. The same night, Terry was given the responsibility of doing flyby patrols over Metropolis. The young Batman receives a distress call on the JLU frequency about a series of explosions, and Batman arrives at the scene, and the team hustles to save civilians from the explosions. Strangely, Warhawk gets another distress call from the JLU frequency that none of the other members seem to receive. Batman was asked by Superman to stay with Warhawk, and despite Warhawk asking Batman to stay back, Batman follows Warhawk in the Batmobile. A ballistic missile was speeding towards Warhawk, who did his best to divert the missile's course and stopped it from colliding in the midst of civilization. However, the missile suddenly explodes, and Warhawk seemingly dies. Warhawk's helmet strikes the windshield of the Batmobile, which itself crashes because of the missile's explosion. When Batman presents the helmet to the rest of the team, they accuse him of killing Warhawk because no one else can second his account. Meanwhile, Superman arrives and defends Batman, saying that once they figure out who set the bombs in the city, they will also find Warhawk's killer. But everyone was in a major shock. In the Batcave, Bruce was examining the footage from the Batmobile's video recorder, which had captured the exact moment that the missile exploded. Upon applying spectral analysis, Bruce and Terry find out that it was Superman who was the traitor, and he had shot the missile with his heat vision, causing it to explode. This wasn't the first time that Superman had gone rogue, and Bruce knew that his Kryptonian friend and ex-colleague was an unstoppable force, but even he had his weakness. So Bruce hands a piece of kryptonite to Terry so that Superman's terror can be put to an end. In the next episode, Batman shows proof of Superman's betrayal to the other heroes, and while everyone else believes him, Big Barda suspects that it was one of Batman's tricks. However, Warhawk comes into the room, filling everyone's heart with joy and surprise. He reveals that he became suspicious of the last distress call because he was the only one to receive it. So instead of going himself, he sent a remotely controlled suit of armor. The team goes to confront Superman, who is fidgeting with the Micron stasis. When Aquagirl touched Superman's chest, a strange eye popped a hole in Superman's suit. Batman wanted to use his kryptonite, but he hesitated for a moment, and it led the piece of green rock to fall out of his hand. The Justice League unites against their leader, who was forced to flee the place. Superman goes to his Fortress of Solitude, but no one knows where it is. This is when Batman says that he might know someone who knew where Superman's secret fortress was, and that someone was none other than Bruce Wayne.
Look out!
At the Fortress of Solitude. With Bruce's help, the League reaches the fortress using boom tubes. A fight ensues, but Batman manages to overpower Superman with the kryptonite sliver that Bruce had given him. Pulling off his suit, the heroes find that Superman's chest is enveloped by a starfish-like creature that is controlling Superman's mind. No one really knew how such a weak-looking creature could control the strongest hero that the galaxy had ever seen. So Aquagirl connects with the creature telepathically and learns that the creature was taken from its home planet by an intergalactic collector of alien species. This collector also captured Superman, but the Kryptonian proved too strong of a catch for the collector. Although Superman killed the collector, he didn't really know what to do with the captured alien specimen, so he brought them back to his fortress until he could figure out how to send them back to their homes. Superman was taking care of those creatures, but one day, the starfish alien leapt onto Superman's face, much like a facehugger, and took control of his mind. Since then, the creature had been planning to take over Earth using Superman's body. Furthermore, Superman had been breeding thousands of these creatures. The heroes go to the breeding ground to take a closer look. But as was expected, the aliens take control of everyone except Batman, who now has to fight the combined strength of the Justice League. Batman does what should be done in these situations and flees to the fortress, but Superman caught up with the Batmobile and took it down with his heat vision. However, Batman uses his skills to electrocute the starfish alien on Superman, thus releasing him from the alien's influence. Superman didn't seem to remember what had happened, and Batman wasted no time bringing him up to speed. Superman then storms into his fortress, freeing several creatures. Once everyone is safe, the League collects the aliens in a glass tank, and Barda uses her boom time to send the creatures where they had come from. The Justice League finally appreciates Terry for who he is, and he is offered a full-time position in the League, something that even Bruce Wayne didn't really enjoy. However, Terry refuses, stating that much like Bruce, he isn't exactly a team player. Clearly, Superman Beyond's story is just as interesting as his canon story arcs. Despite being old and relatively weaker, there will always be a need for him. What are your thoughts on Superman Beyond? Let us know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, have a good one and be safe.
No thanks.